I think that grace is the third stage, right? So it starts with the growth where you're now open to learning new ideas and open to changing yourself. And then you quickly realize that that's not easy, so it takes grit. And I would say that the third stage of being remarkable is now you realize how fortunate you are. And so you realize that you have a moral obligation to help others.
This is Revenue Makers, the podcast by 6 Sense, investigating successful revenue strategies that pushed companies ahead. Oh my God, Adam.
I don't even know. I don't know where to begin with this one. This is remarkable. Truly, truly remarkable. We have, I'm still having a hard time saying
I can't believe
this.
you're going to say it. Just say it. Who do we have as a guest?
Guy Kawasaki is on Revenue Makers.
What?
How did that happen? It's unbelievable.
Serendipitous series of events, but my God, what a great conversation with Guy. He is every bit as remarkable as the people that he writes about. And he does have a new book coming out called Remarkable People. But he's had a pretty remarkable journey, and we talked a lot about it.
The book is Remarkable People. He interviewed some remarkable people, but we really were able to bring it down to being remarkable in sales and marketing and how to bring those ideas into a go-to-marketing team. And it's universal, but it was really great to focus the conversation on there. And he's got amazing insight from his experience, and just like, he's a good human, and it clearly comes across.
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of it is relevant to this go-to-market audience of ours. He was Chief Evangelist of Apple for many years. He is currently the Chief Evangelist of Canva, and an author and a leader. And so much of that insight into how to create great teams, how to lead from the front with grit, grace, and a growth mindset. I'm excited to listen back.
Yeah, I mean, really I'll be listening to this one quite a few times. So I'm sure everyone out there will really be, in some cases, be truly moved by what he had to say and just really take it to heart. So let's dive in.
Let's do it. Guy, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We loved your book. Adam's got a copy right there to share with everyone. Now, for this podcast in particular, you have a go-to-market audience here, but let's be honest, the principles of growth, grit, and grace, as outlined in your book, are universal. You've interviewed hundreds of leaders. What makes a remarkable go-to-market leader?
Well, what makes a remarkable go-to-market leader is that he or she wants to make a difference. And I want to draw a distinction here that I don't consider myself a self-help guru, and I don't consider this a self-help book. When you come from that kind of lens, it's often about, well, I'm going to teach you how to reposition yourself, rebrand yourself, build your personal brand. And that's not what I'm talking about in this book. In this book, I'm talking about making a difference. That is, making the world a better place. And if you do that, you will be remarkable. And one of the ways you make the world a better place is you bring great stuff to market, which is why we're all here today. So, yeah, it's about making a difference, making the world a better place.
I mean, you brought some pretty great things to market, let's be honest, in your role at Apple and now at Canva. How do you synthesize down to what's the most important when a product is being put out there?
Well, this is related to the concept of Guy's golden touch. Now, you might think Guy's golden touch is Guy saying that whatever he touches turns to gold, and that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that Guy's golden touch is whatever is gold, Guy touches. And this may seem like a duhism, but if you want to be successful going to market, guess what? Bring good shit to market. It is that simple. That's 90% of the battle. Otherwise, it's very hard to put lipstick on a pig and end up with anything but lipstick on a pig. So the starting point, I think, is to really make the world a better place. It could be with a computer. It could be with its online graphics. It could be with an LLM. But the key is that it's something that's great. And then everything else falls into place.
So you talked about bringing good shit to market, and they kind of go with doing good shit, right? Obviously, the theme of the book as well, especially for sellers, sales marketers too. But it can get so easy to
Yeah.
get caught up in, did I hit my quota, put the number, and it becomes this sort of almost mechanical process, and it's on a spreadsheet. You want to add value to a customer. You say, bringing great shit to the world. How would you advise? I'm a seller and I'm in this world and I'm like, oh, I made my number. But like, how do I actually like take it further and say like, let me do good and bring good shit to the world?
I would make the case that evangelism is the purest form of sales. And evangelism comes from a Greek word meaning bringing the good news. So the difference between run-of-the-mill sales and evangelism is that what you're selling is good shit. It's good news. Now, I think the next step is the difference between an evangelist and a run-of-the-mill salesperson is that the evangelist not only is interested in himself or herself, let's just be honest, that's true, but he or she is also interested in the welfare of the customer. So I can tell you that when I tell people to use a Macintosh, I truly do believe that it's going to make them more creative and productive. And today, when I tell people to use Canva to democratize design, it's going to make them a better communicator. So don't get me wrong. It's good for me if you use Canva. It was good for me if you use Macintosh. But I truly did believe that it was good for both of us, not just my quota.
Your title for Canva was Chief Evangelist, right? I believe, or is that? So in your mind, every seller, every go-to-market person should be an evangelist. Is that kind of an oversimplification of it in terms of how to look at it?
That implies that evangelism is the only way to go, right? And I'm not comfortable saying that, it's my way or the highway. This is the only way. I'm the core of great sales. There's other people who are great at sales, but this method, my method, is evangelism, and it starts with good shit. And there are great salespeople, and I can't tell you that every time they're selling good shit. Right? I mean, some people just sell shit, and they are successful with it. So I'm just telling you, this is one way. It may not be the only way. It is one way, though.
Yeah. I already believe that this is the episode with the most swearing. So I'm just going to continue down that thread, Guy.
Is that bad?
No, it's great. So we said do good shit, right? But we also got to get shit done at the end of the day. And so we have this saying here at Sixth Sense, ideas are easy, execution is everything. And so
execution is hard. Yeah.
It's hard, but it is literally what will differentiate success versus failure. If you can execute effectively, especially in today's reality where budgets are tight, headcount is down, right? Everyone's got to do more with less.
Yes.
How can sales and marketing leaders effectively transition from brainstorming and, having a great product, yes, but actually then executing on impactful strategies?
So I think it starts with the design of the product. And if that's done well, then you probably create a good shit, which makes sales and marketing and evangelism easy. So some techniques for designing great products. So one is empathy, which is go and understand what the customer wants. And I truly mean go and see. Don't just depend on reading summaries and reading surveys. Actually go and see what they're doing. But even better than going and seeing is going and being, which is you are the customer. So you want to understand what it's like to drive an electric car. Well, guess what? You better drive an electric car so, you understand the frustration of range anxiety, and you understand that when you pull into Electrify America charging location, 9 of the 10 are not working and the 10th one won't accept your Visa. I mean, you need to understand that the cable is too short to reach to the other side of my car, and somebody's parked there and his car is fully charged, but he's been there 2 hours. I mean, you need to actually be that customer, and that will help you design great products. Another thing is to work backwards from the customer. So what this means is a lot of companies like to work forward from what they like to do, what they're good at. We put chemicals on film. We put chemicals on paper. Kodak, we're a chemicals company. But if you work backwards from the customer, well, the customer doesn't wake up in the morning saying, God, if I wish I could buy chemicals on film. That's my biggest fantasy. Why can't I buy chemicals on film? What the customer's wanting to do is preserve memories. So Kodak was in the preservation of memories business. And the irony is in 1975, Kodak invented digital photography. But let's just say nobody using a Kodak digital camera today. And I think that that was because Kodak was working forwards. This is what we've done. We put chemicals on film and paper. We're good at it. We're making a lot of money. We're a publicly traded company. We can't be switching to digital photography, which is cannibalistic with analog photography. And that's working forward from what you have done, what you like to do, what you're good at doing, as opposed to working backwards from what the customer might want. And so I think with those two principles, you're much more likely to build good shit. Now, I give you one more technique, which is actually a little contrary to what I just said, which is great tech companies started because the CEOs built what they wanted to use. I guess you could make the case that they were going and being, but when Woz created the Apple One, it's not like he read a McKinsey report or a Goldman Sachs prediction for the size of personal computer market. Woz built the computer he wanted to use, and lucky for him and lucky for me and lucky for a lot of people, it wasn't just one nutcase called Steve Wozniak that wanted a personal computer. So those are three methods, go and work backwards or make the product that you want to use and cross your fingers that you're not the only nutcase that wants it.
When you talk about working backwards and you talked about being, in the memory capture business, obviously we're talking about getting into like a message and a brand that can just really get into somebody's soul, right? You start off your book almost from the beginning. You're talking about sitting in a room and seeing the Think Different campaign. And obviously that ultimately was such a brand moment, such a complete turnaround. How do you make that leap, or how to really create a message, or where do you start with something like, I want this to sort of penetrate the audience to their core and really give them some sort of a visceral or an emotional wow, right? Again,
frankly, that's the secret of Steve Jobs, right? One of the things I learned from Steve Jobs is if you get people believing in your dreams, selling them a computer is easy, right? I mean, the hard part is to get people to believe in your dream. And again, it's getting redundant, but it starts with good shit. And then I think it's easier. I mean, much easier if you have good shit than just let your creativity go wild. At that point, you're not putting lipstick on a pig, right? So it's much easier to do things. And I think then it's open season on creativity. I'll give you an example, not from tech. So I am a big fan of Liquid Death. Liquid Death is this canned water. You think about it, at some level you say, so what's the innovation here? They put water in an aluminum can. How can that be so hard, right? But I think the marketing that went along with that, which is that those cans look like cans of beer. So parents like me were telling our kids, drink Liquid Death so that when you're at a party and there's all this peer pressure to drink Liquid Death and no one can tell that you're not drinking a beer. And I tell you something, that it really looks like a can of beer. If you don't believe me, go buy a can of Liquid Death, open it up and start driving around. And I guarantee you will be pulled over by the cops. Okay, that's the test. And then Liquid Death has a corporate slogan, which I must say I admire. The Liquid Death corporate slogan is murder your thirst. So I actually have ads for my book saying murder your mediocrity, because I think it's like such great marketing. You don't forget something like murder your thirst.
No, it's so true. So I guess we'll move on. In the section of your book around the high road in business, you talk about grace and success. And when you think about sales and marketing leaders maintaining ethical practices while still aiming for competitive success, I mean, a lot of us who are in the tech world, it's a very convoluted, saturated space. We're all competing with each other. How do you maintain that grace and success?
Well, I think that grace is the third stage, right? So it starts with the growth where you're now open to learning new ideas and open to changing yourself. And then you quickly realize that that's not easy. So it takes grit. And I would say that the third stage of being remarkable is now you realize how fortunate you are. And so you realize that you have a moral obligation to help others. And that is where you separate really remarkable people from people who are not so remarkable. And one shining example that we could debate about now is, I thought up till like 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said that Elon Musk is the most remarkable leader in American business, perhaps even better than Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs, he basically revolutionized the personal computer business. Yeah, you can extend that to iPhone, iPod, iPad. But Elon Musk, he did cars and solar panels and tunnels and chips in your head and going into space and reusing satellites and so many different ways. But to put it mildly, you would not say that Elon Musk embodies grace and graciousness. And so I think that eliminates him from the remarkable list, at least for me. So I just think it's a realization that I wouldn't say that it's, quote, good marketing to be gracious and graceful. It's not bad marketing, don't get me wrong, but the reason why you become gracious and graceful is not because you're trying to, I don't know, if we can coin a term, it's not because you're grace washing your business, right? It's not like, oh, I got to show that we care about society. So what kind of program, what kind of donation can we make? I think it's an absolute core part of your belief that you are successful and you owe it to society to help them. Because if you are successful, particularly at the individual level, if you are successful, yes, you had growth. Yes, you had grit. But I'm telling you that some teacher, some coach, some mentor, some boss, somebody opened the door for you. And because someone opened the door for you, you have a moral obligation to open the door for others.
Absolutely. I mean, you talked about that concept, noblesse oblige, I think is what you'd called it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
My father taught me that concept, but I have come to not like the noblesse part because, when I hear the word nobility today, I can only think of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, right? And they're the nobility and they're going to help the great unwashed masses and the peons because they're such wonderful people. And I cannot relate to that attitude. So I changed that concept from noblesse to success. And I think that's what we're just discussing, that if you are successful, you have an obligation to help other people. And that's at a corporate or individual level.
Absolutely. Just one more thing on that thread. So if there's a Venn diagram of remarkable leaders and assholes, let's be honest, there will be some overlap, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is gracious. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So listen, I was in Silicon Valley in tech for about 40 years. So I have become an expert in assholes. And I think that fundamentally, there are two kinds of assholes. So one asshole is the one you may be most familiar with, which is ego-driven. It's all about me. It's all about my glorification. This company is all for me. Am I not amazing and remarkable? And then there is the mission-driven asshole. And the mission-driven asshole wants to improve people's creativity and productivity, wants to make the world's best computer, wants to make the world's best graphic design service. And I'll tell you that, unfortunately, most people, they don't make a distinction between the ego-driven asshole and the mission-driven asshole. Now, I don't think anybody is going to debate me that's saying that Steve Jobs was a mission-driven asshole. And I work for him. I don't think he was an ego-driven. It wasn't always about him. It was about, he wants to make the world's best computer and he's not going to let anybody stand in the way of that. So if you're mediocre, he's going to run you over and run you out. Now, having said all that, I don't want people to think, okay, so what Guy validated is you got to be an asshole to be successful. Luckily, I listen to this podcast, so I won't be the ego-driven asshole. I'll be the mission-driven asshole. But I would make the case that asshole is not necessary. And I'll give you a great example of a person who is absolutely a class act and not an asshole at all and very successful. And that is Melanie Perkins, the CEO of Canva. She's the opposite of a mission-driven asshole. She's a mission-driven, wonderful person. So you don't need to be an asshole. And it's a very deep philosophical concept. Which came first? Were you an asshole so that enabled you to be remarkable, or were you remarkable so people tolerated your assholeness? This is a deep philosophical discussion that, brighter minds than me have to tackle.
Just on that topic, on the asshole part, because we're just on that route. When you think about, I don't know how many times they work with somebody who's incredibly, it could be a salesperson who's always hitting their number, or they're hitting their benchmark, whatever it may be, whatever the role may be. It could be sales, could be marketing, could be something else. But they are an absolute asshole. And they're absolutely toxic to the culture of an organization. At what point is their success just negated, but they're such an asshole that it's so toxic, they have to go? Or is there a point where success is going to create asshole? I mean, I think that's a hard one.
This is a very hard one because, let's face it, the rules are different for people who are very good at what they do, right? I mean, case in point, Elon Musk. You can't tell me the rules are same for Elon Musk as it is for anybody else, right? But I got to tell you, having said that, you really have to think about what's the total impact. So this one individual is like delivering the numbers and all that kind of stuff. But as you say, if that person is so toxic, what secondary effects is that person having? And it may be when you look at everything, including providing a role model for other people in the organizations to emulate being an asshole, because we see this asshole achieving such success and, that the rules don't apply to him or her and all that. You got to factor that kind of stuff in. So, pretty soon it's like a kingdom of assholes, and that can't be good either. I often think that when you fire somebody like that, pretty soon you're going to ask yourself, why did I fire him or her? But why didn't I do it earlier? The sun still rises.
Thanks for listening to our conversation with Guy Kawasaki. We had so much to talk about that we'll be back next week with part 2. And we know that you'll enjoy it as much as we did. And do you have a revenue project you were asked to execute that had wild success? Share your story with us at 6sense.com/revenue. We might just ask you to come on the show.